Okay, Short Issues Podcast. We are here with another gubernatorial candidate, John Barron. How are you today, sir?
Very good, Brian. How are you?
Pretty good. Really glad I can have you on. So to start open, you're running for governor, is that correct, from what I understand?
It's correct also from what I understand. Yes.
Okay, good, good. Well, could you tell us why you're doing that?
Okay. To give you the brief summary, I'm a former nonprofit executive. Before that, I headed a roughly $1 billion technology program in the Clinton administration. I've been an appointee of Democratic and Republican presidents, twice confirmed by the Senate. I've gotten major federal legislation enacted into law that's benefited Maryland and many other states. To your question, the reason I'm running for governor is because Maryland is not making progress on major problems that damage the lives of millions of people. And I'm offering a fundamentally different approach. In education, for instance, more than a quarter of middle school students in Maryland can't read at a basic level. More than a third can't do basic math. Those numbers are no different than they were 20 years ago. More than 500,000 Marylanders live below the poverty line, and we've made no progress reducing our state's poverty rate in more than 3 decades. Moderate income Marylanders have seen stagnant wages since the 1980s as income inequality has soared. Racial inequities persist in all of these areas. Our state cannot just keep doing the same thing we've been doing for decades, rolling out one unproven government program after another and expect a different result. That hasn't brought progress, and it won't, for a simple reason. Many programs, no matter how well-intentioned they are, don't work, as we've seen too often when the results are measured. So to make progress, Brian, we need to expand solutions that don't just sound like good ideas, but have been tested in the real world and shown to make a big difference in people's lives. That's been the mission of my entire career and of the bipartisan reforms I've gotten enacted into law. Now it's time to bring this evidence-based approach that I've spearheaded to Maryland. So when I'm the governor of Maryland, we're going to do what's proven to work. I'll give you 2 really quick examples, and then I'll stop bloviating because
No, you're doing good. Keep
good.
going.
You admonished me not to keep going on and on forever.
No,
So
I want to hear the 2 things, yeah.
first example, we are going to raise an army of tutors from the community, including retirees and recent college graduates, to help struggling first and second graders, every struggling first and second grader in the entire state of Maryland, because that has been shown, high quality tutoring has been shown to move them up toward grade level early before their problems get serious in later grades. It's also the most effective tool we have to address COVID-related learning loss. Second example, we're going to partner with businesses across the entire state to provide effective job training to every young adult in Maryland who wants to advance. If it's done right, job training can be extremely effective. It's been shown to increase earnings as much as 40%. But the key is to focus that training on fast-growing industries like IT and healthcare, and also to work hand in hand with local employers who provide paid internships to the trainees. So under my plan, the state will pay for the training. The employers will pay for the internships. Our economy gets skilled workers. Everybody benefits. Those are just 2 examples of what I do as governor. But the key theme is, if we simply continue on our current course, we're going to be here in another 20 years. Nothing will have changed. To make progress, we have to zero in on solutions that are tested and proven effective. That's why I'm running for governor. Let's do what works.
Yeah. I see that on your webpage here. It says more than a quarter of Maryland middle school students can't read at a basic competency level, and more than a third can't do basic math. So
That's
this
right.
this is what you want to eliminate, essentially,
Yes, and those
or
numbers are,
reduce. Yeah.
again, exactly the same as they were 20 years ago. I mean, you can roll the tape back to the governor's elections in the 1990s. You know what they're talking about, among other things? The urgent need to improve education in Maryland, especially the schools in Baltimore. You know, we need to move the needle on these problems, and we can't keep doing the same approach.
Yeah. So to get back to your opening a little bit, you kind of indicated that some of the programs haven't led to the progress that they should have. Could you give examples of what you mean?
Yes. So let me give you one example. This from the area of workforce development or job training. The largest job training program in the United States for adult and dislocated workers. It's a Department of Labor program. It's a multi-billion-dollar program. In Maryland alone, it's tens of millions of dollars. It's been around since the 1970s, and it's been renamed a bunch of times, but basically it's job training for adult and dislocated workers. There was a large federal study that came out a couple of years ago that showed that the workers who get training in this program end up with wages that are roughly the same as the workers an equivalent group of workers who don't. In other words, this is a classic example of a well-intentioned program, a lot of money. It's been around for a long time. People are putting their time and energy into this to try to improve themselves and get better outcomes for themselves and their families. But this program is not giving them the results that they're seeking. There are many programs like this. With that amount of money that comes from this program to Maryland, we should be refocusing that on the kind of job training that has been tested and shown to make a big difference, 30 to 40% increase in earnings for low and moderate income workers. Job training that, as I mentioned, is focused on fast growing industries where there are well-paying jobs and where there are very close links with local employers who help design the curriculum and provide paid internships. So that's the kind of shift that I would do as governor, so that the programs we're funding are actually improving people's lives.
Yeah, so can we talk about like what type of predictions would this type of program do towards lowering unemployment, lowering poverty, lowering child poverty? What type of returns could we expect to see from such a program?
Well, for some of these programs, and I should mention that my philanthropic team there's a program, one of these highly effective job training programs, which originated in the Bronx, developed there. We funded its expansion to Silver Spring, Maryland, the DC area. It's since expanded to Baltimore. It's called Perscolis. It's operated by a nonprofit, and it provides this kind of industry-focused job training in IT. It's basically 6 months of IT training. In that program, and there are others, they increase earnings by 30 to 40% for low-income people, mostly low-income young adults, but some older adults too, sustained over 5 years. That's a really big improvement in economic well-being, a really big gain. And if we can do that at scale across the state of Maryland, for every worker who wants to advance, you could have an enormous improvement in the economic well-being of thousands, tens of thousands of people across the state.
Okay. What type of job trainings could you give an example of, like, what type of program people could join up if they're unemployed? For example, are we talking like HVAC or construction, something like that?
Well, some of them are the one I described is to become IT professionals. IT people there's a huge demand for them. They're not enough. It's a job that is type of job or a job sector that is in very high demand. So I believe you go through 6 months of training. It is intensive training. You get certified in the needed certifications. Industry pays for roughly half of the training. So that's important. It's a public-private partnership. And then the trainees have internships, ultimately leading to jobs, IT jobs in companies. There are other industries where this works too. There's a program called Year Up, which operates across the country, a little bit in Maryland, I believe, or at least it used to operate in Baltimore. I'm not sure if it still does. Same story. It's industry-focused job training, but in different sectors. So some of it is in finance, some of it is in healthcare. Giving people brief but intensive training over 6 months, a year, plus an internship, so that they can fill a job, say in healthcare, that is well-paying and in strong demand.
Okay. Um, So I'm trying to flesh out, for example, on the Eastern Shore, a lot of watermen, have seasonal employment issues, because oysters are only seasonal. So I'm just trying to think like what jobs these type of people could get into if they're having struggling with unemployment. Um, so IT is what you're saying, or
Well, there's IT, there's healthcare, there's, finance, and there are others. There's another model which is a little bit different. It's called apprenticeships,
hmm
which is more along the lines of what you were talking about, where you can be an apprentice to be a craftsman or a plumber or different areas. Now, the evidence is not as strong there, but it's promising. That's for, let me put it this way, Brian, not
hmm
everything that I'm proposing is, the ones that I'm highlighting that I've talked with you about are proven to be effective. There's really strong evidence that this improves people's lives in a fundamental way. It increases wages, or it enables people to go to college or whatever, or increases reading achievement, whatever it happens to be. There are others that are promising. Um, Apprenticeships falls into that category. It's done a lot in Europe. There was a test of it also in the United States. Again, this is pairing people who want to basically be an apprentice to learn a particular trade. That's the kind of thing that as governor, we would expand as a sizable demonstration project to see whether it really works, because we don't know for certain. If it does, we would expand it statewide.
okay, okay. So yeah, let's dive into the Eastern Shore question. You're from where are you from? You're from Montgomery? Are you from Montgomery County or?
I'm from Montgomery County, yes.
Okay. What appeals would you make to Eastern Shore voters? What issues can you help us with, do you think?
Well, a lot of the uh, issues that I've talked about, education, everybody wants good schools. Everybody wants their children to be literate, to be reading on grade level by third grade and all. Uh, Both the economic and education issues that I've talked about um, are important across the state.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are others I'd like to talk about. There's some poverty reduction programs that we would try again on a pilot, on a demonstration basis,
Mm-hmm.
for areas, high poverty areas like Salisbury, for instance, that we would
Okay. Yeah.
pilot. Let me talk about that. I can talk about that later.
That's fine. Okay.
Um, there are other issues like climate policy.
Yeah.
Parts of Dorchester County are projected to be underwater. Um,
Now.
they're really on the on the front lines of the climate problem. And I've
hmm
outlined a comprehensive climate policy to reduce carbon emissions that I'm happy to talk about as well. The other piece is getting back to the economic question. A lot of for the more rural areas of the state, the more rural counties, one of the opportunities that's been opened up is we are expanding broadband. There's both the state and the federal government has committed substantial funds to do that to make sure that there's broadband access across all parts of the state. That plus the ability of people to work remotely if they have broadband service. During the pandemic, everybody's eyes have been opened up to the possibility of remote working. You don't have to live in Baltimore. You don't have to live in DC. You don't have to live in Frederick or wherever the job is. Many jobs can be done remotely, potentially commuting in 1 day a week. That offers opportunities for the more rural areas and people who want to live there to have access to well-paying jobs that are physically located elsewhere. But that needs to be coupled with the kind of job training and skills and education and so on that I've talked about. That's the other critical piece.
So more job creation on the Eastern Shore. So Eastern Shore denizens can live and work and be on the Eastern Shore 7 days a week if they want.
Exactly. And a lot of people much prefer that lifestyle and the beauty of the Eastern Shore and, not being caught in traffic, all the ability to do that, but there needs to be the training and the skills so that they can have a well-paying job, the kinds of job training programs that I've talked about.
Okay, cool. Yeah, let's talk about some climate stuff because that's kind of a theme on our show. Um, what climate policies are you in favor of?
Well, I announced a comprehensive climate policy 2 weeks ago. Let me discuss one of the main pieces of it.
Hmm.
Um, Maryland has actually, first of all, climate is an extremely important issue. I think, I mean, it's an existential issue.
Yeah.
We need action at the state, local level, federal level, international level. There are as I mentioned, there are parts of the Eastern Shore that are having problems now and projected to have even greater problems, be underwater as sea levels rise.
Hmm.
So one of the Maryland has done extremely well. We've actually led the nation in carbon emission reductions over the past 15 years. We've had a 38% reduction overall in carbon emissions, while we've had pretty decent economic growth during this time. One of the reasons we have done so well is because we're part of a regional initiative called RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative,
Yep.
with 10 other states, all of which put enforceable caps, limits on the amount of emissions from power plants that are reduced, the limits are reduced over time. And then industry figures out, the utilities figure out how to meet those caps in the most cost-efficient manner. All of the RGGI states have seen a huge reduction, 47% reduction in power plant emissions since RGGI started in 2009. RGGI is also, it has bipartisan support. It has the support of much of industry. One of my main proposals would be to take this regional approach that has worked so well for power plants, for that sector of the economy, and expand it, as California and the state of Washington have done, expand it to other sectors of the economy, including transportation and buildings and industry, which are also major sources of carbon emissions. There's a fledgling initiative to do just that, a regional initiative called the Transportation and Climate Initiative. When I'm governor, we will join that initiative with the 3 other states that are currently there on day 1 of my administration. And I would work to bring in other states, big states, New York, New Jersey, to bring them into this regional initiative in transportation. Because Maryland is one modest-sized state, but acting regionally, we can have a much larger impact.
Right. So to kind of marry two things that we just touched on, I noticed in your climate part of your policies, um, yeah, people on the Eastern Shore have very long commutes a lot of the time, and it sounds like you want to reduce carbon emissions. So any infrastructures that are reliant on, gas infrastructures, buses, for example, you would be in favor of making those green, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Um, okay. So an issue that we talk about on the show, and we've had a few episodes about, are the chicken farm runoff pollution that's going on quite rampantly on the Eastern Shore, which is creating high nitrogen and phosphorus levels in our river and groundwater, and of course, we all know historically what that leads to. What type of infrastructures could you invest in to reduce pollution? And in general, would you be willing to stand up firm to these serial polluters of chicken farm waste into our riverways and creeks and everything? Would you give them the adequate uh, um, en- enforcement they require to meet MDE standards?
Short answer is yes. This is a question of the basic operational functioning of government. We need to enforce the law. This is an area where there has not been sufficient funds or manpower devoted to enforcement. The short answer to your question is absolutely. The broader answer to your question is that there are a number of areas where, I mean, this is basically, it is a question of enforcing the law and making sure that that these businesses are brought into compliance with environmental regulations, period.
Mm-hmm.
How do you make sure that happens? We need to, A, devote the resources, but B, put people in charge of enforcement that know how to make the trains run on time. It's not a question of new policies so much as actually enforcing, making government operate as it should, making sure that the law is enforced. Now, in a number of different areas, the Hogan administration has fallen down on the job. One is the chicken farm runoff, and the enforcement of that, as you just described.
Mm-hmm.
There are other areas like getting unemployment aid out the door, rental assistance out the door, the Easy Pass issue where people are on the phone for an hour and a half. I would appoint people to be the head of each of those operations that have a demonstrated track record of making the pieces work together, of making government operational. I was one of those people. I headed a major technology program in the Clinton administration that had many moving parts. It was $1 billion program. We funded 1,000 small technology companies every year. I won awards for reinventing government. You need people like that. And these are the people I would recruit in charge of these basic operational functioning aspects of government.
Okay. Sorry, you just said something I really wanted to drill down on. Oh yeah, the Easy Pass thing. Yeah, what would you do right now if you were governor right now? What would you do about the current Easy Pass overcharge crisis that everyone's going through? I've been screwed at the bridge toll like a few times now, with egregious fines. What would you do right now if you were governor to the Easy Pass overcharging situation?
Well, people are, I mean, people are, they're on the first thing is, you have people on the phone holding on the phone for an hour and, an hour and a half and not getting through
Mhm.
when they're trying to dispute the charge. Again, do you remember I don't know if you remember this, but when Obamacare was first rolled out back in 2013,
Mm-hmm.
it was rolled out with great fanfare,
Mm-hmm.
and the website turned out to be completely not operational. So it was a great embarrassment for the Obama administration. They called in Jeff Zients, who was like as the fix-it-up guy. And within a few months, the website was operational and Obamacare was actually functioning. People could sign up for it. They got the information. They were able to do it. I would bring in somebody like that immediately to be put in charge of the problem, get the wait time on the telephone immediately down to, somebody should be answering the phone immediately or within the first few minutes, and make sure it's someone who can problem solve, who's a demonstrated problem solver. That's what I would do.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I just feel like it's good to drill down on topical situations because like I don't think Hogan has made any statement about that at all, and like everyone is livid about it, including myself. Is that accurate as far as you know?
Yes, and it's repeated again and again and again. We're not getting rental assistance out to renters or landlords. That money has been sitting there. We're behind other states and just getting basic assistance out. Same thing was true when pandemic unemployment assistance. It's true in the Easy Pass. It's true in a lot of these areas. You need really competent people who know how to make the trains run on time in charge of all of these operations.
Yeah, yeah. I'm trying to think of, yeah, so Hogan today also he's doing this big refund the police thing. What do you think about that?
I support adequate funding for the police. Um,
do you support the narrative that the police were ever defunded?
no, the police were never defunded. That's just not factually, that's not true.
Well, he's really stomping around on social media today. Like violent offenders need harsher times. We need harsher sentences. You know what I mean, to the maximum. Yeah, could you talk about your law and order stances on and what you think of Hogan's like rule with an iron fist approach to this issue?
Well, it's a perfect example of what I was talking about before, doing the same thing we've been doing for decades, and people have been talking about for and expecting a different result. It's the usual, law and order. We're going to lock them up, and all. We've done things like that. Other states have done things like that. We got to
It
do
hasn't
something.
decreased crime.
Hasn't decreased crime. That's right. Now, there is a crime problem in Maryland. Especially in Baltimore and other areas. They are on track or they're not on track. They've had more than 7 years of homicides, of 300 or more homicides a year, which is almost as much as New York City, which has 14 times the population. And we're back where we were during the crime wave of the 1990s in terms of homicide levels. So this is a major problem. It's a matter of basic security when people walk down the street, send their kids to school, go grocery shopping, go about their daily lives. It's also a matter of life and death. So in Baltimore and other areas, this is an issue, I think, of great urgency, but we need to be smart about how we address it. One of the main I've outlined several public safety proposals. Let me give you one concrete instance of what I would do. Mm-hmm. In Baltimore and other cities, an important aspect of the crime problem is that most violent crime is committed by a relatively modest number of individuals, people who are repeat violent offenders, and they're often gang involved. There's a law enforcement strategy called focused deterrence, which first of all, invites these individuals in for meetings with social service agencies, community leaders, and law enforcement, and offers them a positive way forward, like job training or counseling or addiction treatment if they need it, but also makes clear that if they continue to act violently, they will be the focus of extraordinary attention from law enforcement, including police and prosecutors. This approach has been tried in other cities like Oakland, California, and was associated with a 50% reduction in homicide rates over a period of about 7 years. It's something that it's one of the most promising law enforcement strategies there is. We should try it in Maryland. As governor, I would partner with the city of Baltimore, which is receptive to this approach. They've talked about it. They want to implement it, to provide the resources to make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Are you like on a time crunch? Do you got to run away somewhere?
I've got to run for governor at some point, but I've got I've got some
I wanted to talk
additional
about
comments.
housing, but I didn't know if you had an appointment at 10:30 or something. Are you okay?
I think I'm good. Let me just check, but I'm almost positive that I can go on for a little while longer. Sure.
Yeah, because okay, so housing is a problem here on the Eastern Shore. There's a shortage of it. There's a shortage of affordable housing. I'm very much in this boat. My rent is increasing $200 this month. I found out from my landlord, which is really harsh because it's housing on the Eastern Shore, especially in the county I live in, is expensive. Um, what policies do you have as far as providing affordable housing? What can you do?
I have several policies in this area, but let me describe one of them as an example. I agree with you. This is a major problem, and the cost of housing is going up faster. The cost of a lot of things is going up. Cost of housing is going up even faster. Mm-hmm. And there is a lack of affordable housing in many areas of the state. One thing that I would do as governor is to advance common sense zoning reforms, similar to what California and Oregon have recently done. because everybody's in favor of affordable housing. Everybody's in favor of affordable housing, as long as the affordable housing is built, in the next county or the next jurisdiction. So there really needs to be a statewide policy here. So common sense zoning reform would say that even in areas that are zoned for single family housing, for instance, we will allow the construction homeowners to build, for instance, a granny flat, one additional accessory unit, for instance, or we will allow a duplex to be built in these areas. We're not talking about anything. There are no high rises that are going to be built, nothing like that, that would really fundamentally change the character of the zoned area. But there are studies that suggest, and this is true in California where it's been implemented, that recently, that if you do this on a statewide basis, it substantially increases the supply of affordable housing, and that'll translate into reduced cost, greater supply, reduced cost for affordable housing.
Okay.
That's one example.
Yeah. I was looking at your healthcare on your site. You're in favor of a public option. Could you describe your healthcare program?
Yes. So let me talk about two aspects of it. One is, you're talking about rising prices, Brian. Healthcare is an area where the prices just go up and up and up and up. And that's been happening for decades. The average Maryland family pays 50% more in out-of-pocket medical expenses than they did 10 years ago after you adjust for inflation. So one of the proposals that I have outlined there is to put, the state has the authority if the governor will use it, and that hasn't happened yet, but there's new authority for the governor to negotiate lower prices for prescription drugs. And as governor, I would do that. Here's where we would start. There are some prescription drugs that are enormously expensive that have not yet demonstrated a clinical health benefit. As one example, there's a new drug for Alzheimer's. It's sort of still in an experimental stage. The studies are ongoing. We don't yet know whether it will improve patients' cognitive ability or their lifespan or their quality of life. There's some promising indications that it might. It reduces the plaques on the brain and so on. This drug costs $26,000 per year. It is enormously expensive. As governor, the first step that I would take in this area is to negotiate substantially lower prices for these kinds of drugs that have not yet demonstrated that they really improve human health. And those discounts would remain in place until an actual health benefit has been fully established, until the actual results come in. That has been projected to save Marylanders as much as $100 million a year.
Okay. We talked about inflation a little bit. So another thing Hogan's done recently is he's given us a vacation from the gas tax. What do you think about this policy? Are you in favor of it? What do you think?
Well, in general, I'm pro-vacation.
Okay.
But as far as the gas tax, yes, a temporary, given that we're seeing a spike in gas prices, I support this on a temporary basis as it's being implemented, but not on a permanent basis.
Yeah, so from what I understand, the gas tax goes into an account for transportation, public transportation stuff in Maryland. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so it kind of seems like a very Republican thing to do, to use this later down the line as a prelude to we don't have money for any infrastructure investment. We have to instead put all the money into pieces of highway that border properties that Hogan owns. So, sorry. Anyways, getting back to inflation, Yeah, everyone's talking about inflation right now, and poultry is another sector that is increasing in price. I'm a vegetarian, so I don't appreciate this, but a lot of people, are complaining that meat and poultry are much more expensive, and there's a high amount of monopolization of those industries over here on the Eastern Shore, with a lot of command over what the price of things is. Getting back to regulating and enforcing those regulations on poultry farms, what would you do to lower the price of chicken?
Or as
Or can you do
another
anything?
candidate put it, to get a chicken in every pot.
Okay.
Um, uh, I would look at the antitrust laws and see whether, I'm not familiar with the, how concentrated the industry and all. That's something that definitely should be looked at and make sure that the antitrust laws are enforced.
Hmm.
Um, this is really, to some extent, a lot of the problems are sort of, uh, supply chain problems and national problems that have been talked about on a larger basis. But there may be things, as you're describing, in antitrust and other areas that could be done at the state level, and I would look into that.
Well, yeah, the antitrust. I mean, the unregulation is what is creating the pollution situation very much as well. And
Yeah.
I know that this is absolutely true for all the gas and oil people that are control the world. So um, I suspect that it's very likely the same situation with poultry and with a lot of other industries that are just kind of squeeze. The expectation is that things are expensive, so therefore they're going to lean into that and to squeeze as much as possible they can out of everyone.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, okay. Can we end on some like some topical stuff like oh yeah, so what are your feelings, for example, about stuff in the news like Ukraine Russia conflict right now? What are your feelings about that situation?
I just, it's enormously distressing what's going on. Um, I have I have an uncle who's deceased now, but he grew up in Ukraine during World War I. He was a
Hmm.
child, and he was always they didn't have enough to eat. The bombs were dropping, and he had anxiety throughout his entire life as a result of that, um, and he was malnourished as a child. Eventually, he came to the United States. It sounds like we're just repeating history all over again. That was World War I, similar history in World War II. It's just incredibly distressing to see what is going on over there. Um, and I would support at the state level. I know we're going to get more refugees in the United States. I strongly support, welcoming them to our state and providing resources to help them relocate here and have a successful transition.
Yeah, I think Biden announced today or yesterday that 100,000 or so Ukrainian refugees would be coming to the United States.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Um, okay. So, is there anything else you'd like to any other appeals you'd like to make to us on the Shore Issues podcast?
I would.
What's that?
Um, I want to make clear how I differ from, I'll end on this, how I differ from the other candidates in this race, the other people that you're interviewing will be interviewing.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm a lifelong Democrat, and like the others in this race, we all share similar goals. We all want to improve education. We all want to increase jobs, well-paying jobs, reduce poverty. We all believe in an active government. But my approach to achieving those goals is very different than the other candidates. What they're proposing is the same old playbook of rolling out one unproven plan after the next and hoping that's going to work. We've done that. We've been doing that for decades. 20 years from now, will our children look back at this time and say, that we faced all of these persistent problems: stagnant wages, stagnant education, stagnant poverty, rising healthcare costs, and we just kept doing the same thing again and again? Or will they look back and say that in this moment, Maryland did something extraordinary? We rewrote the playbook. We pioneered a fundamentally new governing approach based on evidence about what actually works to improve people's lives. And that we finally moved the needle on education and stagnant wages and healthcare and racial equity and all these other problems. That's the future I want for Maryland. And I'm asking for help to get us there. My website, if folks are interested in learning more, is johnbaron.com, JONBARON.com. And the theme of my campaign is, Brian, it's not a chicken in every pot, as you were suggesting earlier. The theme of my campaign is let's do what works, Maryland.
Awesome. Great slogan. All right. So thanks a lot for coming on, John. You said your website, right? Do you have a Twitter? Do you have any social medias you want to plug?
I do. My Twitter handle is John Baron 4MD, JONBARON, my name, FOR, and then MD, standing not for medical doctor, but for Maryland.
Okay, cool. We'll find you on there. Thanks, bud.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.